Nerd culture, the unrecognized social movement. This is our journey in documentary. Our mission is to shed light on the triumphs and struggles of nerd culture. To boldly go where no nerd has gone before.
Nerds.
What is a nerd?
The word nerd was popularized by Dr. Seuss when he wrote a book called If I Ran a Zoo. And in the book, he was when he used the word nerd, he was talking about someone that nobody really liked and he was kind of a social outcast. Now, that part of the word has always stuck around for a long time, and only recently has begun to change. But after he wrote the book, the word nerd began picking up other tags like fantasy and sci-fi, other obscure interest. But as time has gone on, the nerd has gone from something that was rejected by society to something that's become somewhat popular. So as we see this evolution, it begs the question, what does it really mean to be a nerd?
To be a nerd, what does it mean to me?
Wow, that's a big one right out of the gate.
It defines who I am.
Geeks, some geeks can be nerds, some nerds can be geeks. There is crossover, absolutely.
Having a sense of community.
But being a nerd is being absolutely unashamed to be enthusiastic about the things you love.
It means to be a person who actually accepts and enjoys a lot of popular culture stuff, you know, whether it be cartoons, anime, comic books, video games, comics. It means you have a deeper appreciation for it than average. That's probably the best way to put it now.
Being a nerd, it's a lifestyle. It's an experience that often changes people's lives, and it helps them find a community of people that they are able to identify with. Being a nerd is in some ways like being born into an ethnic culture, because if a child grows up around nerds, there's a chance that it will affect their interests growing up. Just like if a child is born in a different country, they are most likely going to have the values of the culture installed into them. Nerd culture is a unique experience. One does not have to be born into a family of nerds to become one. Nerd culture is not bound by race, gender, sexuality, or other forms of personal identities. Anybody can be a nerd.
I was interested in fantasy and sci-fi from a really early age. My dad got me into that. He brought us up. He would read Lord of the Rings to us as bedtime story, and he'd read a chapter a night. And always watching Star Trek reruns, watching new episodes of Next Gen when it came out. So as I got older, I got into middle school, high school, right around the time Magic was dropping. And that's what kind of got me into gaming. Started playing Magic with my friends, started seeing at the places we'd buy Magic, they had the role-playing games. I got into that in the same way. And in the meantime, in all that was video games. Just kind of a through line running through all of that.
Lots of reading, clearly. Plenty of comic books. Just interests that weren't necessarily any other interests that were contemporary or popular at the time. Some kids like to go out and play ball, and I did some of that too, absolutely. But my fun was also playing with my Godzilla figure, or painting a miniature, or reading a comic, and talking to some of my other close friends about it. The lunchbox. Oh, the lunchboxes. My He-Man lunchbox, or my Battlestar Galactica lunchbox, or talking about Cylons and all the other fun things. I grew up in the 80s, which was probably the heyday of, the Saturday morning cartoon, kung fu flicks on Sunday afternoons, all the cool things. the kids have cool stuff now, but I don't think it was as cool.
Nerds have always been a collection of outcasts. They are different from others, so they band together because nobody likes them. That being said, nerds have always drawn persecution from society because of their willingness to disregard social norms.
One nerd hobby that is particularly ridiculed is D&D, also known as Dungeons & Dragons.
You have stumbled into the abyss of fire. You are no more.
I have a spell to save me.
There is no protection. You will burn forever and ever in eternal torment. You are no more.
No.
Go. Game goes on. Roll.
I've reached the deepest dungeon. I'm now Lord of the Little People.
The treasure is in your sight. Power beyond imagination for the winner to wield for all eternity. Fate turns her face against you. The dragon has you in its mouth. The dragon slowly closes its mouth.
No! I'll do anything. I must win.
There's only one way to save yourself, and that way is blood.
Blood?
Not only does D&D carry a certain social stigma, it has also created public paranoia.
Is it safe for a Christian to enjoy video games that have magic in them if the person playing the games is not practicing the magic?
I don't know what game you're talking about. I know there's one called Dungeons and Dragons that literally destroyed people's lives. I mean, they got into this thing and they were almost, it was like demonic.
Some people have also gone as far as to say nerds are dangerous, satanic cult worshippers.
I do not think that many parents are aware of what's inside the game. In fact, in my presentation, I show many pictures from the inside the books just to show the images of this game. I mean, the gruesomeness of this game and the occult link to it.
Well, I know that when I did my message, and this has happened, I have letter after letter where people took the pieces. Now, there's sixes involved in the pieces of the game, but they'd take the pieces of the game, they would throw them in the incinerator or the fireplace, and screams would come out because there seemed to be some kind of spiritual forces inhabiting those pieces.
You found the goblin's treasures! Golden riches, bitches! Yeah!
Yes, quite clearly the person who rolls a 20-sided die is a psychopathic killer. Although most nerds do not face such extreme discrimination, it is not uncommon for nerds to face animosity.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. There was definitely a stigma. There was, being the nerd kid, being the kid who was into all of that, all that stuff was definitely not the thing to be for pretty much all the time I was growing up. The idea of nerd or geek being something kind of cool, that's still a little weird to me, because that was not at all the experience I had.
When I was in high school, it wasn't cool yet. You were still kind of like the underground kids playing D&D in their basement. But you do find your nerd herd, and you find them fast.
Well, people will pick on people for all sorts of reasons. Sure, I got picked on like anybody else. If I wasn't doing the thing that the other kids were doing, I got messed with a little bit.
But honestly, I never gave a shit what people thought about that because I knew what I liked. I knew where I was.
I don't begrudge any of the kids because kids are cruel. You're laughing because you know it's true. Kids, if you stick out, anything that sticks out needs to get hammered down. So it is what it is.
For a long period of time, nerds were a minority and typically fit the mold of white males. To be a black nerd was to be a minority amongst a minority.
Because I grew up in Compton, went to the elementary school, and they had this thing called the GATE program, Gifted and Talented Education. So, you had the one side, the average basic level kids who you have to interact with and all that. So like I said, so a lot more of the usual street terms and equations, especially for Compton in that time, which was the early 80s. So think rap videos and just regress back by about 5 years and you have a good idea. And then you had the ones that were essentially the group of Carltons for a Fresh Prince reference. There's a whole group of us like this, and we're in this group. And my problem was I didn't fit between either world. I was too much into the comic books and all that stuff to go for the full aspect of that zone of just, I'm supposed to be educated, I'm supposed to be like this, and I can't play with these people versus, I can play with all of you, but I speak a shit ton better, and I have better ideas. And it was that weird zone for me growing up into it. And because of that, by the time I made it through grade school, the parents had to shuffle me off and to bust education where I still had the same problems because now I'm going to a predominantly white area and the rest of the people who are coming in with me from the inner city still talk like that. I'm that one kid who doesn't, and the rest of them are going like, you're not normal. That doesn't work. So that's what I had.
Despite a long history of intolerance, nerd culture has been integrated into mainstream media. The taboo that once existed has now dissolved, and certain elements of nerd culture have become very popular. This has created a transition period within the nerd community.
Let me put it this way, it's not nearly as bad as it was the last time round. Because this is not the first time that geek culture has bled into popular culture and popular zeitgeist. But I'm feeling that this is probably the better time that it has. By and large, probably because of those Hollywood bigwigs who are, machinating to make all kinds of money, and they do it very well.
The biggest thing that the comic book industry did as a whole is when they were dying out in the 90s, when they sold their franchises. Not fantastic. However, this opened up a whole new world to make these movies. Like the first X-Men movie came out when it was like 2000 or 99, somewhere in that genre. So I was like 18, 19, and I was blown away that something that I'd loved for so long at this point was going to be an actual movie.
Everybody gets to go, ooh, the Avengers. And I'm like, right? Seriously, look how badass they are. The Avengers are awesome, right? Yeah. And then everybody else waiting in line with me going, I want the Avengers. I want the Avengers. And they're chanting, Avengers, Avengers. I'm like, right? Exactly. Now you get it. I was here a few years ago, but yeah. It's really, really cool.
It's interesting. On the one hand, it's good. I mean, it's always good to have more people around and more people into the things you enjoy, because then, of course, there's going to be more of it. On the other hand, there's always this kind of impulse to be like, no, that's, that's my thing, and you didn't really go through what I did. And I think a lot of people feel that, but I think that's something that we need to kind of avoid, even if it's it's hard not to feel that way, but you gotta push past that and realize that it is better to have more and more people becoming enthusiastic about these things.
I've liked it. I've enjoyed it. I know, again, certain members within the society are against it in a way because they feel it removes that thing that makes us special if everybody knows about it. But I don't necessarily think so.
By placing all of these, putting these superhero genres and these things from geek culture into these more mass media outlets where people have more access to things, it's hard to get somebody into a comic book series. It's really easy to go to a movie. And honestly, people have their qualms about this. I'm like, you know what? If it brings people to the characters and to the stories, I don't care how you get into it. I'm just glad that you're here now.
There are certain arguments that I do understand, that certain people feel that it's becoming much like pop culture did to things like jazz, and you really see it if you go into musical history, that the bleeding of what was previously subculture into popular culture has a tendency to water it down, as it were. But I don't think that's always A, necessarily true, and or B, necessarily a bad thing. Because, when you water down zealotry, you get a decent human being. Yeah.
So what do you think of the movie?
It's great, I think. I think it's good enough.
Yeah, I think this could be the end.
It's done, right?
Yeah, this is good.